Welcome to Let's Talk ID. Today we have Greg Meyer on. He is a member of the DIA as well as a long-standing industrial designer in the Brisbane area. He has worked with many companies to help boost industrial design in Brisbane and help bring design to more people within Australia. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you're interested in checking out the DIA, I will leave a link to the website in the description and also at the end of the video. Enjoy.
The DIA is set up to advocate for designers such as yourself. So the Design Institute of Australia has a long history back to the 1930s, and it comprises of interior designers, graphic designers, industrial designers, and photography, I think, and fashion we're starting to pick up as well. We're trying to get fashion involved. Okay. So we're sort of very cross-functional across design. That's what a lot of design consultancies are these days in bigger practices. So what we're looking for is efficacy. So people that are employing you are treating you correctly, paying you the right amount of money. You're not designing for free. You are respected. Normally, to become a member, you'd have to have a 3 to 4 year degree under your belt and some experience, but we take student membership and then practice membership. If it's a big practice, a big studio like you get down south, there might be multiple people that can join as a corporate entity. And we encourage collaboration and people to get together, a bit like this forum here. So, I mean, you could be a future intent DIA counsellor if you want it, because this is very good and this is in line with what we try and promote. So
yeah, well, the podcast pretty much came around. I was talking to a couple of my colleagues and we were talking about how do you get experience when you have no experience, and I thought, why don't I just interview people that have more experience than me? So yeah,
that's good.
That was the plan.
So who have you talked to so far?
You're the second podcast. I was meant to have someone else on today, and I'll probably have them on tomorrow. But the first podcast was just the people, like a few of my graduate friends, and we just discussed basically the nature of uni life and positives and negatives, and things we wish we learned in the beginning. Kind of a podcast for younger people. But yeah, you're my first professional podcast member, so there you go.
All right, so do you want me to give you a bit of background?
Well, yeah, my first question was actually, do you want to give me a summary of the DIA? But you didn't even have to ask it, and you were ready to go. So yeah. Well, maybe if you just talk, what kind of projects does the DIA do specifically?
Oh, well, the DIA is the Design Institute of Australia, so they don't typically do any projects. What we do is we facilitate, all the things in the back of house. So like we can facilitate with practice notes for young people starting their own practices. We do CPD training, which is continued professional development. So you, as a professional, when you graduate, you don't just stop there. You have to sort of keep learning new technologies and softwares and ways of doing things. You know what I mean? So we encourage that. We also offer like insurance, like professional indemnity insurance, those sorts of things. We can link you with that. And advocacy, which I talked about before, with looking after the designer. Essentially, it's a club. So we like to cross-pollinate with different projects and throughout Australia with different things that are occurring. The big event that's going to occur nationally is the Brisbane Olympics, in 2032. So everybody's pretty excited about that. So there's a lot of things sort of in the wings that we're trying to coordinate. From across all the disciplines of design. We've just updated a website so that way you can find designers too in your area. So when companies go looking for consultants, those sorts of people can sort of, interrogate it. It's not fully finished yet. And then there's the events that we organise. You've been to a few of our events, so I hope.
No, actually not yet.
Well,
maybe we'll see.
COVID sort of upset that a little bit. So we're aiming to sort of push for like little get-togethers in local pubs like we used to pre-COVID, so that you can sort of talk to older folk like myself and just have a chat.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I'll lead you through the website a bit later, but that's a part-time job. I do that for free out of my own kind. And other designers have done that in the past. We've got representatives from education, so it could be from Griffith University, QT, all the other universities down south. You'll have academics involved, you'll have studio owners involved, you have students involved, and then sort of specialists involved as well. So they could be anything from a materials supplier, or some of our sponsors sort of get involved from a CPD perspective, teaching things about colour and what have you, not pushing their products specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, but outside of that, I consult, as you know, so I have my own consultancy. I run that part-time now. I was running that full-time up until recently. I'm working for the Prodex Group now, which is new product development governance. So I'm working with Gerard Ryan. He's the principal and the owner in Caxton Street. He's an industrial designer as well, and there's Stuart, who's an industrial designer, but we couple with solution architects in providing software after consulting, if applicable, for implementing over the top of larger manufacturers left in Australia of scale are typically food or packaging, because a lot of the car industry's moved back offshore again, and it just enables the MPD system to be stage gated and managed in the correct way, where they're not wasting money, they're getting the best ideas, they're pushing the right products out in their portfolio mix over a 3 to 5 year period. So there's a lot of marketing involved with it, and metrics that we roll up for senior executives like CEOs to look at, so they can make quick decisions. So it's sort of like a software dashboard.
In terms of manufacturing, do you see manufacturing in Australia growing in the coming years back to what it was, or do you think it will continue offshore?
Well, with manufacturing in Australia, what you've got to sort of realise is, and you probably already be aware that Australia in its own right is quite a small market. So, and it's a very competitive market, because Australians are very highly educated, most of them. A lot of them have a lot of experience. A lot of them are very tech savvy and self-taught. If they haven't been to university, they're very clever people, Australians. And we've got a sort of a make-do sort of a culture, which stems from our past, where we've been quite isolated, and we've had to run machinery and equipment for long past their use-by dates. I can give you some examples of that. From a military perspective, you can look at the F-111, for example. That was run for a long time, way past its sort of expiry date. A lot of the old sugar mills with the engineers involved there, a lot of those mills are like 150, nearly 200 years old, and they're still sort of implementing slight tech changes and maintenance corrections and things to run old machinery for way past its use-by date. So we've got a bit of a history there. We're also very clever at medical products and medical breakthroughs, because we have obviously some very high standards from a medical perspective, with interventions and some very clever doctors and surgeons in Australia, and medicos in general. So what tends to happen is Australians are very clever at picking niche markets where big corporations struggle to pivot quickly. I describe big corporations like Ocean Line, whereas Australian corporations tend to be very small and agile, and able to move into gaps in the market and bring new products to market fairly quickly, if that makes sense. Yep. So with that in mind, I don't think Australian manufacture of scale will come back like it has been in the past. Yeah. I think it'll be more of smaller scale manufacture, modular type manufacture, and contributing to bigger corporations that come and want to work in this environment because it's a very stable economy.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a very stable workforce. We've got a highly skilled workforce. We've got a very expensive workforce, but in collaboration with the expense of it, we are experts in things like robotics and automation. So we can be very clever when we need to supplement that cost. So you get a lot more bang for buck when you employ an Australian, put it that way.
Do you see growth in what growth do you see in the coming years in industrial design, specifically in Australia?
Industrial design specifically, well, from my perspective as an industrial designer and my history in it, you need to be able to pivot and move around. So you can work as a young person. I'll encourage it to work directly for manufacturers and for studios, the larger industrial design consultancies in and around the place that are in Sydney and Melbourne typically, and some in Adelaide. So you may need to move, or you can work remotely, I dare say. There is an avenue of industrial design, as you know, that's skewed towards user experience, which is more of the digital interface and user experience interface, which existed when I was a young fellow, but it was more to do with interfacing with the product that you were developing. But the principles of design are still there.
Yeah.
Okay? The way that you work through it. So I would suggest to you that you have more options these days. And given that you guys, a lot of you guys do dual degrees now, back in our day, wasn't as common, okay? Then it gives you more flexibility to pivot, you know, like yourself, you've got a marketing degree as well as an industrial design degree. So, you know, like if you get some experience in marketing and then roll into MPD, there's examples of that with larger Australian corporations that I work with at the moment in packaging and food and acoustic products, but I can't name them for you.
Of course.
But, you know, like cutting edge in microphones and music consoles. Might be springing to mind who they might be. They typically, as they sort of progress up the food chain in the corporate environment, they may start in new product development as industrial designers, or they might, if it's dual degree, do a bit of time in marketing, and then they might spend some time in sales, and then they sort of develop and move into sort of leadership roles. So they get more of that cross functionality of what happens from a new product development cycle.
Okay. So yeah, a lot to come in industrial design. Very exciting.
Yeah. So I wouldn't sort of think of yourself blinkedly.
Yeah.
Just think of yourself as an ideator, and then think of the processes that you use and build your experience up, and you find your niche. I can tell that you like skateboards in the background.
Yeah. One of those that designed one of the trucks.
See, there you go. That could be a potential new business for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a lot of industrial designers too start their own businesses. Some of my cohort, one in particular that springs to mind, James, he in collaboration with a design consultancy out of Sydney, has developed a rapid deployable a hospital suite, so it can be sterilized. So you can break that into a larger sort of regional hospital with bigger spaces and break the spaces down into smaller wards, if you follow what I'm talking about. And there's been countless examples of lighting type companies set up. And who knows, skateboards could be your thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's the good part about design is you get kind of the tools to bring a product to market. Well, at least the foundation to bring product to market, and then gives you that, if you ever do think of that product, it can, all we need is one big product, I suppose, and then if you have the tools, you can get that. Yeah.
And that's what, from my perspective now, and Gerard's, with the new product development governance, is we try and de-risk that for big corporations, but there's nothing stopping you from doing a bit of research and reading some books about stage gating, and then have a bit of a look at, new product development sort of textbooks like this one. It's done by Wiley out of the States. It's Product Development and Management Association. So just keep learning.
Yeah,
So,
that's the thing. Constantly absorbing information.
Yeah. So what you can do from that is you can reduce the risk of you developing your own product instead of learning from experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Take some of those techniques and things and apply them to your own business. But what I'd suggest to you is if you want to start in business, start early.
Yeah, do it young.
Because once you start having kids and a mortgage, it becomes less likely that you can free your capital up to do that, you know what I mean? Because you've got commitments. So if you want to experiment with it, go for gold, go early.
In terms of new technologies coming up in the space, which technologies do you think are going to affect industrial design? When we think of key technologies, I mean, you can, I don't want to structure too much. You can, whatever key technologies you're seeing, what do you think is going to reshape industrial design in the future as far as technology?
Oh, definitely quantum computing and artificial intelligence. But that's exciting. That's not something to be frightened of. You can use that to your advantage at the moment. With the current offerings, I think it's skewed by the amount of people that are trying to use it at one time. There's a bit of an overload on it.
Yeah.
So, look, I don't think AI from a small business perspective, you know how I was talking about Australians being niche and be able to pivot and move very quickly. I don't think it's going to affect that market too quickly, particularly in a highly educated community like Australia. I think it will affect manufacturing in and simple sort of jobs, but I think it'll become an affordability issue where the AI will be sort of dominated by the bigger corporations that can afford to utilize it. You know what I mean? Because you need massive quantum computers to drive it. So whether they weigh that up with value for money from using people, humans, which would be a good thing to do, I don't know.
I suppose you can think the same thing with like robotics currently. Is like robotics, it's there, but it hasn't just taken over every job in the market because robotics is so expensive. You need a pretty good use case to implement it.
Correct. Yeah, it's all about scale. Large scale manufacturing businesses like some of the BMW factory in the Midlands and in the UK, for instance, in Coventry there. That's a prime example. They're producing all the minis around the world. Yeah, that's a largely robotic factory, state of the art. And the quantity and the scales there to punch it through. In Australia, look, you can use robots down to, say, a local injection molding company of fairly large scale, say with 12 or 20 injection molding machines on the line, where they're sort of doing the preload and the load out sort of stuff. You could use it in mills for lifting heavy lumber and those sorts of things where you're getting a lot of back strains and issues from a workplace health and safety perspective. So there are uses in a smaller scale manufacturing context that we get in Australia. And SMEs, you know what that stands for? That stands for small and medium enterprises, which is what sort of dominates in Australia, except for the scaled businesses, which is the food and packaging, as per se. And the rest of the stuff tends to be project driven. So don't forget our buddies in engineering. So and the built environment architecture. So you can contribute most definitely to that. I've designed claddings. I've designed commercial fit out, quick fit systems in my time. Do you know what I mean? Done a lot of testing on it. So a lot of the code marking and things that are required for architects to be able to specify it in specifications and complying to the BCA, that's Building Code of Australia regulations. So look, industrial design offers you all sorts of exciting adventures.
That's the hardest part, is to pick where to go, which direction to take. But yeah.
I would find something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy doing every day, and just see if you can push the envelope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. As far as which technologies do you think, we'll go with which skills do you think every designer should learn to be relevant in the coming decade?
Well, look, I think with the cost of education now in Australia, from our days, we were fortunate. Everything goes in cycles, right? Everything's fairly cyclic. So, I'm not being arrogant about it. I think we were just lucky. My cohort, back when we were trained, I think we were lucky enough to be at the pinnacle of maximum amounts of information and lots of contact hours. Like, we're doing 40 to 80 hours a week when I was going to university. These days, I don't think you do. I think you get about 20 hours contact a week.
It's very much online these days.
Yeah, and it's online.
You get the information, and then you do most of your work from home, kind of thing. But yeah,
that's right. So it's a different context. I don't know if that was sort of pushed because of what happened with COVID. Look, it'll have to come back. A lot of Australian universities have invested in educating overseas students as well. So there's that scale problem. They're not able to bring in as many as before. So that's why I said it might be cyclic, where they have to go back to smaller classes and trying to train people to more depth. But what you've got to remember is you have more broad skills than what we had when we came out. So most of you have sort of dual degrees as well. Look, back when we were going through, I started, I sort of transitioned from TAFE through to university. So I did architectural drafting back then, or architectural technology, and then moved into product design, because we were in a recession back then where interest rates were at 18%, so there wasn't a lot of building going on. And the Australian dollar wasn't worth very much. It was worth 50 cents to the American dollar. So when the Australian dollar is that low, what you find is a lot of big corporations from overseas will use a highly intelligent workforce like Australia to do a lot of their work for. So I suppose I was lucky because I was given all these experiences and training. With you guys though, look, the world's a lot more of an open place than it was when I was your age. So you're more likely to sort of collaborate and work independently, like you've been sort of trained through the university, for companies that are overseas. So there's those sorts of opportunities. It's definitely easier to network with people. Back in my day, it was more of who you knew and who you targeted. Whereas these days, through LinkedIn, you can, should say stalk, but you can, you know what I mean? You can
force the network almost. Yeah.
Yeah, you can invent your network, and if you sort of present yourself as a decent sort of a person like yourself and most of your colleagues, most people will link in with you and help you out. Do you know what I mean? Because that's business.
I suppose that's the good thing about the modern world of where I am at design, is like back then working abroad would have been remotely would have been basically impossible. Whereas now some people work completely remotely. I still think industrial design probably isn't as easy to work remotely compared to other design disciplines due to the collaboration and the physical aspect. But still definitely getting more possible.
When I've run design studios or worked in design studios or been a team leader in electromechanical days with Assa Abloy, when there was a factory and research facility in Rocklea, believe it or not. That was part of the old Whitco factory, which were the old window chain winders, and that was offshore to China. We encouraged sort of open workspace and a design sort of mindset where everybody sort of collaborates and you tinker with things and you go around and you talk to colleagues and you give each other ideas and you're sort of constantly bouncing off each other. look, that is probably the ideal way to work because it can occur more quickly. But working in isolation, you can become a bit siloed. Do you know what I mean? So, and a bit stifled. But there are things like, you know, what we're doing at the moment is online sort of FaceTiming.
Yeah.
There are tools around. You've got the immersion tools as well now.
Metaverse.
Which are pretty incredible. You know, back when Sam Buccolo was first introducing the QT, like it cost a fortune. These days, kids have them in their bedrooms. So it's becoming the norm. So because they've reached the economy of scale, I think it's great. But from getting back to your original question about technologies and how they affect Australia in the future, I think some advanced manufacturing, you know, like with rapid prototype technologies and things that I'm seeing at the moment, I think in the future, say 50 years down the track, potentially designers, you know, might have sort of niche markets where they design things and customers, wealthy customers, print their designs. You know what I mean?
So you think from before you mentioned a small scale manufacturing being desirable in Australia, like opposed to large scale manufacturing, do you think it could be small scale kind of modular 3D printing manufacturing could be possible?
Absolutely. And I was talking to the director of a RMIT-led institution that specialises in innovation manufacture yesterday about that and the potential with the new electrified vehicle market. So, because from a petroleum-based motor system, you know, you've got to have a chassis designed gearbox to transmit the energy through the back of both wheels. With electric motors, you tend to drive each wheel. Do you know what I mean? So the way in which those sorts of vehicles are constructed will be very modular. Savic out of Melbourne is a fantastic company because I noticed you got the little motorcycle in the background there. I think I mentioned it when I met you at QT, and I'm a massive fan. I haven't ridden one yet, as you know. I'm an old combustion motorcyclist on a Ducati Monster, so I'm looking for a replacement. Whether the riding style is a bit different, as we talked about with throttling, tends to be a bit more predictable on a combustion, whereas with an electric motor, it's sort of very consistent. Yeah, and there's a lot of torque. So, especially on two wheels, I don't know if that contributes to many scooter accidents and things like that. But yeah, look, I think there's a lot of potential with product development with that. Yeah, and I think from a defence perspective, because I've been involved with the Army Reserve for 15 years as a combat medic, just to sort of supplement things at home. There's a big emphasis through defence to being able to sovereignly produce their own systems in the defence of Australia. They're not anything but a defence force, so it's just sort of posturing, just to put people off doing naughty things and potentially stabilising areas in the local region that sort of may get out of control from time to time. So there's that. There's in Australia too, there's a lot of boat building because we're very good at boat building and we have the perfect climate for flying. So there's a lot of gliding clubs, there's a lot of sailing clubs and motor clubs, boat clubs. Yeah, you name it in the sports and recreation, like we're famous for developing those sorts of products. So, and then from a larger scale, you know, you get your Rivieras and those sorts of luxury cruising yachts down the Gold Coast and up the Sunshine Coast are starting to do it. And then RVs, you know, like RVs, caravans, you know, with the Jaycos out of Melbourne. I've neglected to mention Jayco because they're a scale manufacturer, so that's naughty of me. Yeah, those sorts of industries are niche industries for Australia that does typically do very well. We're also renowned for our construction know-how. So a lot of the big Australian construction companies do very well overseas. So it's a matter of leveraging off that with potentially developing products that can be exported overseas as well, building products.
Yeah, I suppose the one downside with 3D printing is the speed limitation, so it limits scale. But I mean, as you're saying, if we focus on more the niche markets, you don't really need the scale isn't an issue as much. You know, especially for a luxurious product, it might be better just to 3D print it at a low scale.
Yeah, 100%. Whether you can get to that size in the future, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have seen some concrete rapid prototype buildings out of Germany and in Europe, which sort of blow my mind, which are pretty cool. Whether you could do that with techniques for boat building, probably. There's a lot of certificates that you can do and degrees in robotics and IA, which I'd encourage people to have a bit of a look at if they're, starting out. You know what I mean? But if that's your slant, if it's not, and it's more sales and marketing it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need in a design team, typically you need characters with different strengths and weaknesses. You're not all going to be fantastic stylists. Some of you might be really good at, putting, manufacturing techniques into place, or snap fits, or being really clever at how you mount PCBs and whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, or packaging, you might specialize in, or color.
Yeah, I've recently been looking to upskill into UX as well.
Yeah.
I think that is something that we already, as you were saying, we already learned the fundamentals in industrial design. And if you learn the little bit extra for UX as well as the programs you need, I feel like it can be a useful addition, because then you're not only designing the product, you're designing an app or a website to go with the product, or a successful interface. Because I feel like so many products, you get the product's designed very well, but then the associated app or whatever is just really badly designed. So sometimes it needs to go both ways.
Yeah, it's about the full experience. And I've neglected. Well, from a rapid prototype perspective, I suppose I'm talking about small consumer products. Okay. From a systems perspective, have a think about systems. You know what I mean? So, like, you can get involved with systems design.
Yeah, systems are really interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose from my perspective, it was the most experience I've had with that was, I suppose, with cladding systems, being able to fit different building types, like for weather tightness and thermal efficiency, being fireproof, all that, easy to put up, so it doesn't take too much time to put up. You know what I mean? Because labour is a big thing in Australia, so it's about being able to put it quickly up, being quickly able to be manufactured, so you'd be able to throughput it through the factories and facilities locally. And then raw material, as you're bringing it up, it's the availability of raw material. So you've got to think from supply right through to end user warranties when you're doing cycle testing. You know what I mean? So, but that's all the excitement of what's coming ahead for you guys.
I feel like from a sustainability perspective as well, getting into system design is really good, because a lot of time a product solution maybe might not be the best improvement for a system, whereas system design can really improve the overall system's efficiency.
Yeah, 100%. So you're thinking of now when the product enters the waste stream. So with a lot of products that are made in Asia these days, they're designed to be replaced like fashion items. Back in my day, fashion is still the same. It's sort of, you buy it, you use it, you threw it out. You know what I mean? Or you gave it away, sort of thing. Gone were the days of repairing clothes, although I do badly, but that's just me. But with older vehicles in Australia, there was a culture of keeping them running, like classic style Holdens and classic, like your drift cars, your Nissans,
and races as well, bringing back the old bikes and revamping them into the new kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a industrial design graduate that has his own business in West End that does cafe races.
Oh, really?
So again, that was his passion. That's what he pushed into. And he's making a great success from all accounts of it. Do you know what I mean? Another industrial designer I know of got right into CNC, and he specialised in shapes to start with, but he got very clever with it and started to design components to replace within aircraft motors. Another industrial designer I know was very clever with threads and pitches on screws, believe it or not. He ended up designing nuts and bolts for nuclear power rods for nuclear submarines.
Wow.
So you'd be surprised at where industrial design can take you.
Just got to find that one little niche, right? And you're ready to go.
100%. But you got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to collaborate. And sometimes, you put in environments where it's not sort of conducive. Know when to move on, and when to stay.
Yep.
Like the old Kenny Rogers song.
In terms of sustainability regulations, do you see it reshaping the industrial design industry in the coming years?
Sustainability, absolutely. So from a packaging perspective, at the moment, we're working with Australia's biggest packaging companies, and it's all about the 2024 packaging covenant, where they're trying to eliminate all the plastics out of food packaging, etc. So there's quite a bit of new product development, MPD, that's having to go on in able to do that. So there's food technologists, there's chemical engineers, a lot of chemical engineers in the packaging side. And a lot of packaging specialists, like packaging engineers. And then you will get an occasional industrial designer that sort of floats in and out there as well. That they produce opportunities, okay? And I would suggest that with the world sort of pushing their standard of living up, and there being a lot more expectations about from the consumer world perspective. So everybody wants clothes, everybody wants consumer products like mobile phones and those sorts of things. As the uptake pushes on, then we most definitely need to be more conscious of finite resources and an environment, because most critically and fundamentally, we need clean air, clean food, clean water, and a place to sleep which is quiet. Yeah. So those four things are fundamental to health. In not becoming susceptible to poor health. So you've got to be able to exercise as well. There's a lot of our work these days in the modern world is sedentary and not physical. So it's about quality of life, style. And I think from an ethical perspective, a lot of industrial designers and designers in general have had that in the back of their minds when they do work for big corporations. The CEO might be pushing for product, and it's very short term 2 to 3 year life cycles. It depends on the culture in which the business is derived. I mean, a lot of American models are short term companies where with startups, they don't look to intergenerationally. In Europe, they tend to want to have intergenerational businesses that last a long time. Not to say that America doesn't or hasn't done that. Like there's a lot of companies like Ford and that, where there's 4 or 5 generations of people might have worked for Ford. There might have been 2 generations or 3 generations worked for Microsoft now. You know what I mean? Some of those big companies, and Apple probably 2 generations as well, or 3, pushing 3. I think for longevity of those sorts of corporations, they need to sort of get on board with sustainability. So, getting rid of single use, that they're going to have to get their heads around opening products up to being repairable again, instead of designing them so that they become defunct, or you have to contact the manufacturer to fix things. You've got to be able to fix things, and that's really, as I mentioned to you when we started, that's where Australia's niche is. Like with all the old Fords and Holdens and whatever that have been around for donkey's years, there might be 50-year-old, 30-year-old, 50-year-old Tiranas fighting around now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, that takes some doing to keep a chassis structurally integral enough to take the force from the motor still, and, you know, rebuilding the motor. That takes some doing. It takes a lot of clever people to put that together.
I suppose that's from the design perspective as well. We're the ones who, when we create the product, we have to be the ones to advocate for that kind of, you know, repairability, or even just modularity, like being able to replace broken parts, things like that. Because as you're saying, like currently it's not really taking into account a lot of, especially electronic products. I think it's starting to bleed into some products, but electronics doesn't really seem to be making much of a change anytime soon. So yeah.
Well, when I deal with Asia, I'm often appalled by the amount of waste that they're prepared to release in order to get a product out quickly to within the scope of their manufacturing technologies. So instead of going, oh look, that's too expensive, that's not really our forte, they'll take the work, do it, probably pushing their cost up a little bit high to those that aren't aware, but for the naive, but compared to local rates, still competitive, and not sort of going, oh look, we recommend that you use so and so that specialises in this type of manufacture and that is more capable of producing that particular component. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Whereas in Australia, they probably would more advocate for that kind of thing. Yeah.
It used to be a lot more so. I don't know so much these days because I'm dealing more with larger corporations. Yeah, but it used to happen quite a bit. You'd get a lot of referrals from other manufacturers.
This is a bit off topic, but it's almost politics in a way. But do you think that, have you heard of the declining birth rates in Asia and how it's having an impact on the country? Do you think that, because obviously the country is very much based on their population, like that's how they're keeping up with the scale that all the other countries are demanding. Do you think that the declining birth rate could have an effect long term on their manufacturing capabilities?
Any issue presents an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's how you view it. Like if you run scared from problems that you see, might be the lowest risk option. But if you do some of the things that I sort of mentioned early on, like that you pick up from some of these texts and from the stage gating with risk mitigation and risk matrices and things like that, you might have learned in marketing, it could provide you with very profitable opportunities to niche into.
Yeah.
So instead of, for example, with combustible cladding, a lot of businesses sort of went all because they were just importing product, so they didn't have control over the processes. I was fortunate enough to be working with an Australian manufacturer, which is what I've tried to pride myself with doing, is working locally with local manufacturers, and that gave us the opportunity to run at the problem. Do you know what I mean? So we were able to try and solve the problem and make some money from it instead of running away from it. So with an aging population, you can think about all the different products and issues that the healthcare system and the layering of that. So it's talking about systems again. So it'll impact on aged care, it'll impact on the health system, and then potentially food as well, production. So think about those things and then sort of massage out solutions. So, and there's lots of different forums you can get involved with. So there's agricultural forums, there's advanced manufacturing forums. The government gets involved with it. What I find with a lot of government entities is they're very siloed So a lot of the grants and those sorts of things aren't very cleverly administered unless they find experts in the industry to do that. There isn't a lot of governance around it. They probably could learn a thing or two about it because they're not experts in manufacturing. It doesn't seem to be the collaboration with design institutions like the DIA. There seems to be more of a collaboration with bigger business owners that they get their feedback from, because it seems to be the easy route to get information from.
Yep.
But that's up to organisations like DIA, for example, or Australian Design Council. We're trying to work with as well collaboratively. They represent more the business owners, and it's a privately sort of held institution, with DIA is sort of a non-for-profit, but they have their purposes. That they should be advocating for more transparency, I suppose.
Yeah, okay.
Can you see that?
Yep.
So that's your landing page. Okay. So they've just rebuilt it. So I have like news items and things like that come up. So like DIA student crash course wrap up. That was in Melbourne, I think. DIA accreditation. All sorts of funky things that rock up there. And if you go into events, what you get is the events pop up with the date. Let me close some of these other things that are open and refresh. There we go. So you can view the events and buy tickets. Now, when you remember, you get discounted tickets as well. Okay. There's also jobs advertised as well. So for you, you can search in here for industrial design. Look, there's a job with Cobalt.
Yep.
Intent. Might want to have a crack at that, have a bit of an investigation. I don't know if you'd have to move to Melbourne, but you could check that out. I'm just being very industrial design specific. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, the podcast is mainly for industrial designers, so be as specific as you want.
There's things to buy. So, you know, there's books, interior design books, decoration books, membership books as well. There's resources. Now, this is what I was talking about when I first started. So there's practice notes. Might ask for my membership number. But gives you fees and services guides, intellectual property, what happens when you get into disputes, HR management, all those sorts of things that you might need to drill into. Okay. So Robert Geddes did a lot of work with that back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Put that in there. He's a fellow and in the Hall of Fame. He's a local Queenslander.
Yeah, Rob's great. I had him in my final subject.
He's a top fellow. And he's mainly involved with sort of corporate governance has to speak these days as well, and high level sort of things. So your career sort of progresses. We're not as hip as we used to be. That's old guys. This talks about what the DIA is, voice of professional design, and then this is really good. Is the code of ethics. I love this. So it sort of talks to you about what that is. Designer's responsibility to the community. We're talking about sustainability and to the client, responsibilities to other designers. Acting ethically. So if you're going to shortchange one of your mates in design, best to let him know and see if you can sort of collaborate and make amends.
Yep.
Designer remuneration and publicity. Okay. So there's some of the things you can have a look at. Bit of a history there. Look at those old guys, the ladies. So, yeah, that's, see you later. So that sort of shows you, gives you a bit of a history, and then you can do searches. Now, it's not fully functional as yet because it's just been revised, but it will be soon.
Cool.
Keep an eye out.
Are there any events coming up in Brisbane that people should look out for?
Yeah, we're finalising those tomorrow night. So there's some industrial design specific ones. So I'm going to try and get innovation manufacturing CRC Dave to have a bit of a chat in the podcast and talk to everybody about what we've discussed. So it's titled just as a grabber as Death and Theft of Manufacturing in Australia, but it's really about renewal and what we've been talking about in niche markets.
Yep.
So I'm talking about scale. Can you see this website that's just come up? Australian manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. So there's lots of little communities that are involved that you can subscribe to. There's a lot of overlap as well, and that's part of the DIA's job, is to try and work collaboratively with these other organisations. CSIRO I've reached out with in Queensland to try and get a look at the site out at Kenmore, Pullenvale Way as well, because they specialise in a lot of robotics. So they've got like a little paddock there where they test robots on different surfaces and things like that. I think QT are involved with it as well. From a plastics reduction and reuse perspective, there's the Griffith University going to try and collaborate or get them to collaborate with RMIT and potentially University of New South Wales and be the conduit and assist through kindness with the DIA, because we're non-for-profit, you know what I mean, with some of our members. So there's those sorts of things to look out for. There's if you're interested in defence in Queensland, because there's a fair few defence projects, like you can look at AIDEN, which is an association of defence industry networks. Okay, so there's lots of different disparate manufacturing based organisations that you can get involved with, and not to mention is like projects, significant projects that the government led. So they could be like, for instance, the Olympics, look for bids on streetscape and those sorts of things. Right? So did you come to David Shaw's practice over in Wollongabba last year with
No,
IP?
that one, unfortunately.
I think one of the lecturers.
Oh, David Shaw, the from Street and Garden.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm in contact with him, but I haven't. I can go to the open day now.
So, like, he's been a long member of the DIA and won some sort of a recommendation last year. Dash with wayfinding. Those sorts of companies employ industrial designers, which is sort of that street furniture, which sort of moves into like landscape architecture and architecture built environment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's those sorts of things to look out for as well.
Okay, cool.
I'll stop sharing that. Stop sharing. So the floor is yours.
Thanks for that. No, yeah, I think it's definitely good if some more young designers get into the DIA, and start getting, even just from a networking perspective, the events would be very good for that kind of.
Like, explore some of the design consultancies. Like, I run mine part-time now. I've rented my studio space out to a lawyer at the moment, because the Prodex team sort of wanted me to come and work for them and help consult in that MPD space. And there's a bit of software development, which is what I'm sort of interested in as well, from having rolled out electronic security products with software, from that experience there. Have a look at websites of industrial designers in the area and look and see what they're doing, get a bit of a feel, reach out to them.
Yep.
Like I've got some projects that sort of sit in the background after hours that I can sort of feed out. I've run it full time and had full-time employees, but it's sort of set to how the market is. So as the Australian dollar is so closely aligned to the US dollar, unless it drops significantly, we don't see a lot of projects come in. But there are consultancies in Australia that specialise in US corporate design. So I was lucky enough to be involved with that out of Sydney with Design Resource back in the day, which was Energizer and Verifone FBOS machines, and there was an arm that specialised in rail concepts that competed with the likes of Bombardier, which is a big French organisation. So you can work on projects like that, rail projects. I think there's a couple of guys that are working for that big international conglomeration. What you'll probably find in the future is government investment will go from the larger consultancies that tend to be international consultancies and aim to build up the SME consultancies again, the smaller consultancies, so they get a more diverse and collaborative and enriching environment where the money collected from local taxpayers goes back into the local economy. It's not going into larger international consultancies' bank accounts. I think that's something to look forward to, and we're definitely predicating that with the DIA and trying to push that. So, yeah, so be positive. That's all I can say. But you're going to have to be resilient in these times. Yeah. Okay. So and you've got to remember the economy's cyclic. Okay. So I know a few designers that have moved into, being medicos. They'd like work on medical products and moved into nursing, or they've moved from being industrial designers and teaching industrial design at university, or they've decided I like the art side of stuff. I'm going to teach art and design at school, or they go back to university and become academics. Do you know? So there's lots. Yeah, so you just got to find your niche and have fun.
Exactly. As far as education, what skills do you see university students leaving university missing the most?
Oh, look, the practicality of putting together a design, certainly a manufactured product, that's definitely slipped big time. So you spend a lot of your time training graduates of today to do that. And I think you've experienced that yourself, where there's that expectation to know things. And with, your more funky vertical market orientated manufacturers that are left in Australia, in the microphone realm and the mixer realm, can't give you their names. They probably won't take on graduates. That they're more likely to take on people that have got experience. To gain the experience, you've got to work for fabricators, you've got to work for injection molders, you've got to work for small consultancies, or gain your own experience from developing your own products, if you can. You know what I mean? So, or collaborate with startups. Be wary of startups, though. You got always ensure that you get paid for the work that you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's all right for yourself, but for other people, please ensure that you get paid. So that's my only takeaway for tonight.
Okay. To add to that, what changes to university degrees do you believe would benefit the prospect graduates of the future?
Oh, look, most definitely understanding how to develop a usable product, understanding a bit more about finite element analysis and some of the engineering required to get simple products through. That would be a great sort of help. So a bit more sort of engineering, a bit more of an engineering perspective. I know the big catch cry these days is ideation, and everybody needs to design, and you see, big international accounting firms say, we teach design, and realistically, they've done a 2-day course on. So there's a big difference between what some spruik is offering in 2 days to which would, for us as professional designers, have been through degrees and we use for CPD, perspective continuous, continuous, improvements in our own knowledge, that they sort of spruik it and use it as a bit of a catch cry, and it sort of diminishes and waters down the true designer's role in society. So, it's a bit like me going and spruiking, unethically, that I could, introduce governance to big corporations outside of design or product design development. That's not the case at all. It's specific to new product development.
Yeah.
But I think people take a lot of liberties these days. Money does funny things to people.
Yeah.
And that's been the cause of a lot of issues over the ages, and that will never change. So yeah. So it's as long as you act ethically, you do what you say you're going to do, and show that you're trying to develop skills in order to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. I think you can get around that. And most Australian employees are big-hearted enough to understand that. I don't know about overseas.
Yeah.
But most Australian employees would definitely be looking at a graduate as a potential long-term employee. So
investment for the long term.
Yeah, look, I think if you can value add and show that you want to be part of that business and you want to contribute to that business and you're passionate about that business, employers can see that in you and they'll be willing to make amends. A lot of 3D design is at the moment done in SolidWorks. I know that you guys tend to use Fusion, which isn't what I'd call a traditional parametric modeling tool. But I mean, does it matter? Who knows? From a collaboration perspective, most certainly BIM technology is going to be a big one. So in construction, you're able to collaborate and time manage, project manage, and see things from a building perspective, from piping through to air conditioning, through to cladding, through to structural, through to interior design. You're able to see all sorts of different clashes and things that brings it up in 3D. It's all cloud-based, of course, because it takes a lot of computational power. But those sorts of web-based softwares are definitely going to revolutionise design from a collaborative perspective. Yep. You might be working with other industrial designers, or you might be in Australia. Normally, you might work with an industrial designer, electrical engineer, and a mechanical engineer. You know what I mean? So it's a cross-functional sort of a team. Yep. And a manufacturing engineer, if you're lucky. Yeah, that's still probably the way to go.
Moving back to your professional life,
yep.
What lessons have you learned along the way, and what would you possibly think would benefit other designers out there?
I would suggest back yourself. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Not necessarily give them away, but just be sort of honest with what you can deliver. So what you promise you can deliver.
Yeah.
And if you make mistakes, own up to it. Own it, because you learn from mistakes. Okay, and then that prompts more investigation. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got an inquiring mind, of course you're going to make mistakes. There's no problems with it. Mitigating the risk of your mistakes as a junior designer is really your manager's role. So it's really her or his, or whoever's responsibility. So to coordinate the effect. So and as you progress your way up the food chain, you'll start to take responsibility because you've had those experiences. But don't be afraid to make mistakes. Back yourself. and enjoy what you're doing, because when you first start off, it's so much fun. There's so much learning, you know what I mean? So much experimentation. It's just like, wow, you've opened up this big treasure box of things that you can do and possibilities. As you start to get to my age, it's more about governance and trying to mitigate risk in your career, you know what I mean? So that, you know, there aren't big, expensive mistakes made. So you have intergenerational businesses that keep going. They don't fold because of a costly mistake.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's the boss's job to protect you and create that creative environment for you in order for you to experiment.
Do you think that remote working is getting a long-term job as a remote industrial designer is possible, or do you think there's always going to be some aspects where you have to be able to come in for some days of the week?
Yeah, look, I love to see people face to face, but yeah, look, people do it. They do it remotely. So yeah, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah, in the future. And of course, you can fly to meet people fairly quickly, but whether that'll be something that's sustained long term, I don't know, with the price of fuel. Maybe we have electric planes. I don't know. Maybe we sail. Who knows? So maybe it's an augmented reality meeting where you sort of come in 3D.
Well, yeah. Have you heard of Gravity Sketch, the 3D visualization program?
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of thing could become a collaboration program where you work remotely but collaborate through that, or do you think it will always be some element where you need to be? Yeah.
I think it's a personal thing, and you've got to start to think about people's cognitive abilities. So, you know, if they see clearly, if they wear glasses, they wear a hearing aid, you know, how coordinated they are with their hands and how dexterous they are with their fingers, how quickly they're able to cognitively use the system. Most definitely, from my experience, from an immersive perspective, yeah, I could. But from people's perspective, you've got to be cognizant of people that, you know, might not have perfect hearing or perfect eyesight. Who knows, in the future you may be able to augment smells and tastes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's exciting, isn't it? And then, yeah, it becomes totally immersive. How dangerous is that, though, in the environment that you sit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I notice a lot of pedestrians try and blank out noise, and I see a lot of near vehicle accidents with scooters and things like that. Is it the scooter person's responsibility or the pedestrian's responsibility from not paying attention? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Number of people I see on phones and that step out onto roadways as well, or people looking down screens in vehicles. You just got to be sort of ethical enough to be able to design through the whole system and understand, you know, what the implications are of your design.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Just to wrap up, do you have a couple of recommendations you would give to a designer just leaving university, post-grad like myself? I have a lot of colleagues who are in that kind of situation. What advice would you give to them on how they can make themselves more employable so that they can get the job that they're looking for out of university?
Be persistent, keep knocking on doors, keep attending events, get involved with the DIA, get involved with hubs and startups and things like that, and make your own luck. There's no such thing as luck. You've got to get out there and get amongst it.
Okay.
So, and then make sure you're sort of presentable, you're a nice person, and you will be anyway, because you've got through university. You've got a reasonable sort of a presentation that you can give them, and a quick spiel of, you know, how you think that you can contribute to that company. So just, you know, think about how you can sell yourself.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Greg.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll see you soon at another event.
I'll see you at a DIA event.
Sounds good.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, man. Have a good one.
Take care.
I'll see you later.
You too. Bye-bye.